Do you ever wonder how reviewers like myself approach review copies, whether you're somebody who just watches the channel or is an author that's looking to sell one? Well, in this video, we are going to talk about it. Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be talking about my kind of approach to review copies, responses there, and just kind of what my policies are and how I look at that. And I feel like this is a video that because I've talked about this a little bit in videos, but I've never actually done one. So I feel like this might be for people who are just normal viewers of the channel. This will give you a little bit of insight into how I approach these things, where I get these review copies that I get, and how I make those decisions, as well as for people who are potentially wanting to send review copies or have sent. And now I will have a video that I can say like, hey, go watch this video, and you'll hear all about my review policy and kind of what it is, and then you can determine that if it's going to be a good fit from there. So let's talk about it. I do have on my YouTube channel, you can find an email address that I use for BookTube, as well as I do have my PO box is in the description and has been for basically since I've had it, which is quite a long time. So I have gotten in the past some people who just cold send me their book, which is fine. I have the address there, so I'm not going to tell you people that you can't do that. I will say that if you're the kind of person who's going to do that, include some sort of note. Tell me about it. Don't just send it. But I've had some people do that, and I've read books that I've gotten through that method as well. If I'm not specifically agreeing to it and accepting it, it's probably going to take me longer to get to it, but that's always an option. But most of the time when I'm communicated with, it's going to be via email from the channel, or I think maybe people have found me via like NetGalley or Goodreads or stuff too. I'm not really sure, but I think most are finding the channel. So let's talk first about sending an email, because I've seen the gamut of review copy request emails from people who are just kind of like, hi, you want to read my book, and don't tell me anything, to the like formatted MailChimp things are really popular right now as well. I've seen authors send their own, use a template, or have somebody that is sending them out on their behalf as well. Kind of seen all of it, and I think it really depends on quite a lot of factors. But the number one thing is it helps if it seems like you actually have some idea who I am. And I don't mean that in a like, do you know who I am way, because obviously I don't expect that. But if you're sending me a request to review your book and you have no idea who I am, what I read, what my taste is at all, and it shows, it's probably going to be a no. And I've gotten this where I'll have like, hey, it's my new YA romantasy book. And I'm like, why would you think that I want to read that? Because you probably are just sending this out to a whole bunch of people. And so I usually will actually respond with a decline and say like, hey, no, I don't read this at all, so this isn't going to be a good fit. I know a lot of people will just straight up ignore those emails, which I have done sometimes too, if it's like really obviously a low effort email as well. But have some sort of idea of that. And it helps too if you are, and like I said, I'm okay too with the template ones if they're well done. But it helps if you're reaching out and saying like, hey, I've seen some of your videos, and like you're giving an example, you're saying something based on, I've heard you talk about this, or your review of this, I think you might like my book. Like, why are you sending me your book? Because I think that's important. And I've had people who just aren't really sure how to approach and just will be sending it to anybody or asking anybody. But also like you're needing to sell me on your book, because if I just accepted every single review copy that I got asked about, A, I'd have a lot more DNFs, and B, I would never get to anything else. So like you do need to convince me to read your book, but also like I don't want to accept your review copy if I'm going to hate it. If it's not for me, I would rather be upfront and be like, hey, no, I don't really like these genres, or the description does not sound like it's going to be for me. And I've had some people be like, hey, if you want to give it a shot, I'll still send you a copy, and that's fine. But also, I don't want to waste my time or your time if you're sending a review copy, or my viewers' time, because if I'm just doing like a super lukewarm review that's not really helpful for anybody, it's not going to be the greatest by any accounts. And of course, it's hard to know. Sometimes books are going to work, sometimes they're not. That's going to be the same no matter what. But having some sort of idea about who I am, what I like, before you send a review request is generally helpful, because I've made hundreds of videos, many of them reviews of books, so you could find a similar book or do that. But I've also done multiple videos about my top 10 series of all time, top 10 standalones, other books, types of things. Like I'm pretty open book, pun intended, as far as my taste. And so it's really not that hard to find out what the taste is of a reviewer of any sort if you just kind of look at their stuff. And it really shows when you don't, when you're trying to pitch a book that sounds horrible to me with it as well. So that's kind of what I will say with emails, with that sort of thing. And the thing is, too, because I do completely understand not all authors personally send the messages. I feel like the personal messages where my favorite is like, hey, I know who you are. Based on this, I think you might like my book. Here's the description of my book. Because I've also had the ones where they don't even tell me anything about the book and just like, hey, do you want to review my book? And I'm like, that gives me nothing at all. And I can't really answer that based on that. But some of the ones I've seen that are like templates are like, here's a lot of information. Here's a blurb. Here are links. And so it's at least very easy to tell if it's for me or not. But also it's those ones I feel like I've gotten a lot more of those where they are just mass sending and clearly aren't actually paying any attention to who they're sending things to. So it can go either way. I feel like be a little bit of a mixed bag with how that works. But the email part I feel like is really important as well. Now also something, how you sell your book is important too, because you should be able to explain your book. If you can't like give me a good description or comparisons or that types of thing, it's very difficult for me to know if I am going to enjoy the book as well. And so I have legitimately had that where I'm like, trying to like get more information in the book and I'm like, oh, you can read about it here, which is, link me out, but, giving some sort of description in the email. Cause again, you're trying to convince me to read your book, not the other way around. So don't make me work for it too hard because I get too many requests and I'm way behind as it is. So give me some information on the book, and I think is important as well. And it's not even just me either with my taste, because I have to think about the fact that, if you want my review to be helpful to you, it probably needs to be something that my audience is interested in as well. And sometimes there are things that I've read because I'm interested in and my audience isn't super interested in. And so that's still something I consider when I think about it, is like, are people going to care to hear me talk about this book or not? And, that can vary as well. But make sure you give me enough information that you're selling your book, and like I said, it really does help to have reasons of, this is why I think you might like this. Something that I find really, really helpful with it as well. And just making sure, again, that you're not sending something to me or any reviewer that is completely not something that they read. Because I've gotten lots of those where I'm like, oh, here's this historical fiction one. I'm like, well, I don't really read historical fiction. Here's this romantasy. Like, I definitely don't read romantasy. Here's this YA book. I'm like, really don't read YA for the most part. And so it's just like you're already making it really difficult to want to do it at that point, as well as just like, the thing is too, I don't mind, like usually if I agree to a review copy, they're going to send a physical copy, which also, for the record, I'm pretty okay with whatever too. Like I've had many people send me a physical copy. If you send me a physical copy, it's at least going to get shown off on the channel. I'll show it in a book haul, or sometimes I'll do a short and do a whole book mail thing as well. So I'll show it off. But ebook, audiobook, whatever, I'm pretty okay with everything. I read all formats. So that some people really do have preferences, and I used to, before I got really used to digital, I used to really prefer physical editions, but I'm generally okay with whatever at this point too. So knowing what you have there, but usually, like, if I agree to physical, they always ask what's the mailing address, and I always am tempted to say, I'm like, well, it's on every single video that I post. So if you ever look, it's very easy to find the mailing address if you want it, but really it's maybe they just are asking instead of just sending again, which is totally fine. Now as far as physical copies, I will mention before we get into the general kind of review policy and my approach as well. I've talked a lot about how to approach, but I will say I've seen a lot of authors really stepping up their game with shipping physical books, where they'll either be like miscellaneous stuff like stickers or bookmarks, or like custom little bits of packaging, and that goes so far in just making something really interesting. And I've gotten really cool books like that where I've raved about it in a short or in a video, like, oh, this is so cool, opening it up. I might not have even liked that book ultimately, and that has happened before. But that kind of thing, it's very eye-catching. It looks good to show on a channel as well. People are going to be interested. And then as well, somebody may see that, think it's cool, pay a little bit more attention, and maybe it will be for them too. Because I always do try to talk about both sides and who something might work for. So do think about your packaging and that kind of thing as well. And, I'm not saying you have to go nuts with that sort of thing, but if you really want to catch the eye, it is a good way to do it. I've had several authors who are really, really good at that and send really interesting things and do that as well. With it, I will note too, if you're sending a physical book and you were physically shipping it to me, sign it. I mean, like, why would you not at that point? Many people do this, and I have a big collection of signed books that I've gotten this way. But like, it's just another thing that it just looks cool. It's an added thing, and if you're physically doing it, like, if you're shipping it from Amazon or Ingram or whatever, then obviously you can. It's fine. I'm not gonna be like, oh, they didn't sign my book, but like, just yet another thing that you can do that's very low effort that makes it look cooler. Like, oh, this is signed. That's really cool, because who doesn't like a signed book? So let's talk a little bit more about my actual review policy, which I feel like if you've watched my reviews before, you'll know I do try to be honest and I try to be constructive, whether positive or negative. I will have reviews where I'm like really raving about something, and I've had some negative reviews where I'm like, this is really negative. But either way, I always try to think about, if I love this, there's still people that may not. And so I try to always be balanced with saying like, I love this, you might not, based on this. And if I really don't like something, I always try to be balanced with like, hey, I really didn't like this for these reasons, but you might like it if, and go from there as well. So no matter what, I'm going to be honest. I've never accepted a paid review for the record either. I have had a few people offer, or I've been invited to sites where they do paid reviews. I'm just not really comfortable with that, because that gets into a weird territory of, are you going to be mad if I happen to not like your book or TNF your book when you've paid me? So I feel uncomfortable with that. So I've never done that. No shame or judgment for people who have paid for reviews. I know that is a legitimate thing, especially with like some specific review sites where you pay and you get a review, and that can be important. I'm just personally not comfortable with that and have not agreed to do it when I have been asked. If I am interested in your book, you sending me a review copy, that's sort of already like, you're sending me a copy of your book. That's really it. And I get that, it's mine now. And in exchange, I'm going to read it and attempt to read it at least, and then do some sort of review for it. And I always try to be upfront with that. I used to say like, I will 100% read it and do a review. I do not guarantee that anymore, because I got to the point where I had way too many review copies, and I had too many that I wasn't liking, that I was forcing myself through, and it was really making it harder for me to get to things with reading, getting me into slumps. So I always like to be upfront. I'm willing to let more slide in a review copy than something I've just picked up myself before I DNF, but I have and will continue to DNF review copies if I know it's not working out for me. That's for a couple of reasons, because I have tons of things that I want to get to. I don't want to force myself through something I'm not enjoying, but also if I force myself through a book that I'm not liking, you're going to get a worse review than if I just DNF it and mention like, hey, this didn't work for me for reasons. I still try to be constructive with that too. And I've had books that I've DNF'd that I think others would like, and I mention that and try to do that to them. But if your book's like a 3-star and I'm just really not enjoying it, it's not bad, but I'm not enjoying it, but I forced myself to finish it, it might drop to it too, because of the fact that I forced myself through it. So it honestly, it benefits nobody for me to keep reading a review copy that I'm really not enjoying. And so I may DNF. If I do finish, I almost always will do a dedicated video review, unless there was some situation where I just really didn't have much to say. But again, if I'm finishing it, it should be good enough that I'm enjoying it enough that I have some things to say about it. But I always will do some sort of review. And I've had some where I just do a Goodreads review because I didn't end up finishing, or I just I didn't have a ton to say for a video. But most of the time I will do a full video there. And I do, like I said, I do try to finish, but especially as I've gotten backed up and I've had some, it's like you can tell when a book's not working for you. And so I try to keep that up. I do always as well try to, in the reviews, be constructive, talk about things that didn't work for me and why they didn't work for me, and suggestions. And I try to as well when I contact authors, and some people take it better than others. I have had pretty good experiences with people being open to the feedback, but sometimes I'll give more blunt, specific feedback to authors, like, hey, this is this, whereas I do, I'm never gonna lie in a review. Like I said, if I don't like something, I will say it. And I've had books that I've reviewed by people that I know and like and are friends with that I've not liked their books, and I've given honest reviews for, and it's a weird position, but it is what it is. And so it's I'm certainly not, if I'll review somebody that I know and like and their book and give it a negative review, I'm certainly not going to lie for somebody I don't know that's sending me a review copy as well. But like I said, I try to be constructive and talk about the things that I think could be done better or what didn't work for me and that kind of thing as well. So I think that is just important with review copies. And so that's kind of how I approach it. The other thing to think about is timing, because I used to try to give timing and be like, oh, I can probably get to it this quarter. I am at the point where I still am so backed up that I have no idea when I'm going to get to review copies anymore. And I've told people that. It's another thing, if you're okay with having no specific timing in general, right now anyway, as a filming this, you'd have to be if you're going to send me a review copy, because I have no idea when I get to anything with it. That's the thing to be sure. I used to think like, oh gosh, why do people take so long to get to review copies? And then I started getting a lot of review requests, and I realized why people take forever, because it's hard to fit in those plus other things you want to read. So timing is just indefinite in some cases, but if you send me the book, I will eventually try it. Whether or not I end up liking it, I will eventually try it. Even people who've cold sent me books, I still keep them in my list of review copies to get to. And there is one, I still haven't gotten to that Nicholas Raven, which I've had for a really long time, which is one of the ones that was cold sent to me. It's because it's really long, and I've tried to start it, and it seems pretty good, but I will eventually get to it. But so like that's the thing. If you send it, I am eventually going to try it, but it's varying on putting in. So I always like to be upfront with that as well too, because if you're looking for like a review on release or like before release, you probably aren't getting that from me unless it's something I'm specifically going and requesting. That would be a little bit different. But as far as just time to send. And so with that as well too, if you're watching this and you're like, I'm cool with this, I'm just gonna cold send you a book, go for it. You sure can. Like I said, but if you want to try and make sure that it's gonna be a good fit, emailing is still probably a better option. But like I said, I have the address in there. People have done it. I've read some of those books too. So it's there, the options for you, so you can feel free. But that's kind of, like I said, that's my approach to reviews, as far as what I'm going to talk about and say, as well as just in general how I look at timing and talking about the books and kind of showing it, because I don't want to put a damper on anybody. Like I love finding books but I enjoy. And ultimately, that comes to why I still accept review copies, because I thought about not, and I have slowed down at points, but there's nothing better than getting a review copy of some book that's like really small or unknown and just really loving it, getting to rave, getting people to read it and talk about it, kind of being there on the ground floor. And I've been there for some series where I was really an early adopter, and I've just gotten to rave, and some like things too where like I wasn't expecting it, because like a good example of that is one of the earlier review copies I did was from Derek Bailey, the Voidwalker collection, which is not really my thing, and this is one that I might have, like today I might not have accepted, but I was more willing to accept whatever at the time. But it ended up being something that I actually quite enjoyed. I've talked to Derek, he's been on the channel, and I've he's a great guy. I've read everything he's written at this point too, and so I like finding those just cool things, being on the ground floor, getting to talk and promote, because I love books and I love talking about books, and if I love your book, I'm going to shout about it and try to get other people to read it. And naturally though, that not every book's going to be a winner. There are going to be some that I don't like, and that's just kind of the way it is. And so I don't ever want people to be discouraged if I really don't like their book. I'm one person who has specific taste, and lots of people have very different taste. I have some very specific things as well that are really unpopular opinions. So just because I don't like your book doesn't mean that nobody's going to like your book. There's lots of really popular books that I don't like, and some of the plenty of books that I like that aren't that popular as well. So never know, but I do like doing it, and that's why I continue to do it. And I accept review copies, read review copies, and talk about them, because I just like being able to talk about a book that you may have never heard of as a viewer, and go from there. And then for authors as well, I like being there and getting to talk about it as well. So that's why I'll continue to do it, but I have had to be a little bit slower at this point, like I said, just because I'm still pretty backed up. So this has turned into probably more of a long-winded video than I thought it was going to be honest. But like I said, I hope this has been interesting as a viewer, and helpful if you are somebody who is an author, or somebody who's going to be potentially looking to send requests to reviewers, whether it's me or somebody else. Maybe you're watching this and you're like, oh, this is not a good person for me, but hopefully the information is still helpful to you. So, but that's really it. Like I said, wanted to just kind of talk through there. So Let me know your thoughts in the comments as well with review copies. If you're somebody either who's on BookTube and does them, and if you agree, disagree, or as you know, if you're just somebody who watches the channel, what you think of when I'm doing review copies and that type of thing as well. So be interested to hear your thoughts as always. That's it for this one though. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the link in the description as always for the Patreon if you want to support what I do, as well as the Wizardly Enclave Discord if you want to chat books or really anything at all. It's a lot of fun and love to have you. And of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.